very much for your contribution, and we'll circulate the usual links and keep track of things as ever, but thank you for that. So now I'm going to move on to our third session, which is inviting Aidan Morgan from the UCD Innovation Academy to lead a panel discussion around what the future of work might look like post-COVID. So we're waiting for Aidan to present us, for Alan to present us with the answer. Hopefully he's coming along and telling us exactly how it's going to work, and all we have to do is follow the instructions. It may be more complex than that. I imagine Alan is the program director for the Innovation Academy's creativity and innovation in education, and so Alan's areas of interest are all around innovation in the education space, and we know the Innovation Academy by definition is interested in that kind of inspiration and change. So without mis-selling or underselling Alan any further, what I'll do is hand over to Alan for the next 30 minutes and his panel, and I'll let Alan too, just so that he knows what we're doing, run any Q&A session at the end as well. You'll see the chat going up. So Alan, with no further ado, over to yourself and your guests. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael, and good morning, everyone. Great to be here with Work Smarter Together. I love what you guys do, and always happy to be a part of it. So no pressure there from the introduction to Michael to finish off the session this morning. So we've brought together, we thought we'd bring together a couple of people who have actually worked together in a commercial environment to try to solve and help solve the hybrid work model, and to kind of address that problem in an organizational setting for both the organization leaders and the employees involved. So I'd like to welcome our guests and to sincerely thank them for their time, because I know they're busy people. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Jess Hayden, a former colleague of the Innovation Academy, former program head of program development with the Innovation Academy a number of years ago, and Jess has gone on to do weird and wonderful things. And at the moment, Jess runs the Brave Lab, and this is all about an organization that realizes a world where people and planet can thrive together. And the mission is to put people and the planet ahead of profits, guiding organizations and their people to be braver. And from beautiful Kinvara in Galway, but based now in Berlin and dialing in from Berlin, you're very welcome, Ruth McMahon is the Employee Experience Manager at SoundCloud. And I'm sure most of us are aware of SoundCloud, but just in case, to keep it nice and official, SoundCloud originally, as you know, a Swedish-based organization, or founded in Sweden, online audio distribution platform and music sharing website, now based in Berlin, henceforth why Ruth is in Berlin. And it's obviously one of those platforms that enables users to upload, promote, and share music and digital processing around streaming audio and that kind of whole area of music sharing. So Jess and Ruth have recently worked together, and I'd like to start off this conversation by saying, and maybe to tie everything we've heard this morning, and it was great to hear from Ciara. Great to hear from a graduate of the Innovation Academy and who's doing so well. And I thought it was poignant, the fact that Ciara talked about she didn't miss the M50. And this morning, when I was preparing for this interview, or fireside chat, as we prefer to call it in the Innovation Academy, I was listening to Morning Ireland, the national radio program, and they were broadcasting from different places around the country and talking about the changes from the pandemic and the impact of the changes that's going to happen maybe from Friday onwards, and the whole concept of hybrid working and where it's going to and where it's come from. But I was saddened to hear about the traffic reports and how people are still stuck in traffic. For those of you maybe not living in Dublin, it was a particularly wet and horrible late October autumnal morning this morning, so a typical heavy traffic morning. So I would maybe start off by saying, what have we learned from the pandemic? We seem to be still at this juncture where we don't know if we're going to work or coming to work or working from home or hybrid working. And I think a lot of the talks this morning have talked about that. So maybe just to platform this, to headline it and say, how is your business navigating the future of work? And I'd like to go to Jess maybe first and say, Jess, in relation to organizational change, you've worked with many organizations, including SoundCloud in more recent times. But how are organizations going to navigate this new road, particularly for the individual versus the organizational needs? And then how do we have that? How do you have that hybrid conversation with employees and leaders alike?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I think, well, to kind of, go with your first question, what have we learned? I think we've learned something really interesting about the psychological contract that we have with our organization. So all that stuff that isn't written down, this assumption we all had that we can't do the thing we need to do unless we're co-located. We're all in the same place at the same time. That's now in flux. That assumption has not been validated. We know that lots of organizations can now carry out their core work with people all over the world. I've been running my business completely remotely for more than 5 years. So now we're going to question everything, right? And if we think, well, what other assumptions have we been making that maybe wouldn't get validated if we had the chance to really question them? And I think that all this stuff is going to be in flux. And I think people will be right to question it, because this is how we'll progress to the organization of the future that we need to be. How do you do that, though? How do you balance all this stuff in flux? The world is also changing. There are huge priorities out there that organizations, research we did recently would show, aren't necessarily prioritizing as much as they should be. Like response to the climate crisis, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and accessibility. These are all things that people want change in, but the action isn't happening as fast or as responsive enough as people want. So how do you square that? We use user-centered design, and this is something that I would have gotten my head around during my time in the Innovation Academy, but I personally saw wow, there are so many applications for this in the world of work in organizations, because what we are able to do with that user-centered design process is say, here are all of the needs, all of them out there that are currently going unmet. Now, what can we do to find a way to address most or sometimes even all of these needs? So we get all the individual needs, because we know the lives of our employees are changing second by second. The world is changing, and the organizational focus, the mission is going to change as well. So we put all of that stuff down and say, okay, what novel ways can we do to approach this that actually meets the needs, because they're changing all the time. So I think that's the approach that we took when we worked at SoundCloud, and other clients as well. The first thing we do is we look to wonderful people like yourselves, people in universities who've thought about this stuff in the organizational labs, and have published fabulous evidence and research that we look to and we use. And it was super clear that, it's not going to be possible to go back to former ways of working. The status quo is eroded now. We have to create something new. So that was kind of our guiding light in this.
Before I go to Ruth, thanks, Jess. Before I come to you, Ruth, I think it's interesting this morning looking at all the different backgrounds we have, and we started off on Zoom 2 years ago when the first lockdown happened, and we're all using fancy backgrounds and pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco and beautiful rivers flowing behind us. And now everyone is happy to show their houses,
yes.
happy to show their rooms, and happy to show their maybe their home office. Do you think, Ruth, that psychological change, and Ciara talked about this safe psychological space earlier this morning, that psychological change where actually it's okay to show off my, if you like, my personal background? I think that's a huge change in people's mindset.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just a result of, hopefully, I had a conscious effort to normalize this thing and make it very normal for us to be in these once very private environments with cats floating around our tables, our kids everywhere. That was one thing we put a big focus on at the very beginning, was really encouraging camera on. Even people who didn't even want to have their camera on in this place. And just speaking about, that we're all in the same situation, and that making sure the whole humanity, the human element of this weird situation was at the core. So yeah, happy to get to see more people's.
Yeah, and I think the human-centered design that Jess speaks about, and that whole concept of, you know, looking at things in maybe a design thinking framework, a true design thinking lens, I think is hugely important. And I think organizations like SoundCloud and other organizations that Jess has worked with have that concept of the user is the most important, driven by the customer experience, driven by the employees. So maybe on that note, Ruth, maybe just talk to us, and Jess, please feel free to jump in here to support Ruth in relation to what you've done together. What supports have you put in place in SoundCloud to enable this new way of working?
Yeah, so just go back to the beginning. I think it was towards the end of 2020, I suppose, after we kind of somewhat settled into a very reactive period, that initial move to work from home and figuring things out on the go. We made a decision, like as a recognition in the company, that this new way of working was here and it was here to stay. And that was something that we had to embrace and keep up with if we wanted to like best serve our employees and our business.
And was that a difficult acceptance at the first instance, Ruth?
I don't think so. I think it's got to be innovative and keeping up with what's going on in the world around us is kind of what we do as a business also. Like our mission is to lead what's next in music. So to lead what's next in working kind of aligned nicely with that also. Maybe there's a few people who had to get on board, but overall it was pretty positive. But yeah, we just wanted to make sure we were going to design something purposeful, innovative, and most importantly, as Jess can describe more, that was tailor fit for our unique, diverse body of employees, and aligned with our business goals, of course. So that's why what Jess presented us with, or her kind of approach to design, spoke to us as a project team. Jess, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, like it was super clear when we worked with SoundCloud. SoundCloud are unique. All organizations are unique because all the people in them are unique. But SoundCloud have this really interesting position between the music industry and the tech industry. And so when we kind of looked at that, we realized it's not going to suit this organization to go fully remote, because they do need to form that connection, and we still need, as the previous speakers were talking about, we still need that physical space together, that co-located time to do creative stuff, collaborative stuff. It's so hard for technology to support us to do that in any way that's going to be like the real life effort. And SoundCloud is full of artists, full of creators, and that's what they do. They build a bridge between creators and technology. So that we knew that had to be part of the solution for the company as a whole. And we only found that out by really looking at what are the needs and talking to people and doing the research. And I think this, Alan, from design thinking, you spend most of your time thinking about the problem, and not that much time generating solutions, right? You kind of front load to empathy and what's going on for people, what exactly is changing, what are the needs now. A few things that kind of stick out and related to your comments around commute, like we spoke to people in our research for other clients and for we've done loads of research on this topic. We've spoken to people that would be in the air 4 times a month on transatlantic flights, and we kind of did the calculations and realized they're spending more time traveling transatlantically than they are with their families or in the location they're traveling to or from for work. And that just, that realization that we can still do the work, but we don't have to do that anymore. People were just unwilling to accept going back to that kind of life. And the other side, we had another insight, which was some people love the alone time they get in the air and are unwilling to give that up. But instead of saying, okay, right, we're just going to have to go back to air travel, design thinking would say to us, no, is there another way we can fulfill that need for alone time? Yeah. Is there another way we can fulfill that need for the status I get by being a business class flyer?
And can I just address that point, Jess, and Ruth as well? So in the design thinking framework, we start off with empathy and looking at the user, like focusing on talking to the user, what they want, to try and understand the next stage of the design thinking process, which is problem definition. So maybe just to ask you, Jess or Ruth, I don't mind, you can answer together. What was the problem definition? What was the ultimate problem that jumped out from the empathy stage that you undertook?
think there was like 30, wasn't there?
There's quite a few. Yeah. Yeah.
And do you think, like, you know, one of the things that I spoke recently to a CEO of a huge organization in Ireland that we do a bit of work with in the academy. He does some work with our students and so on. And he said to me, one of the things I've learned from the pandemic is I'll never drive 2 hours for a 20-minute meeting.
Mm.
He said, it's just a waste of my time. It's a waste of my organization's time. And it's, you know, and so on. So there's a lot of different learning. So of those 30 problems, so the point or the question I want to ask is, like, has the pandemic, you know, fundamentally changed work practice? And would these problems have arisen otherwise? Or been discovered, sorry.
I have a response to that, and I think, Ruthie, I think you can maybe add to it as well. But I think that the thing we ended up actioning out of all of the things, because I mean, that's what you do, right? Surface all the problems and then try and figure out a way to address them. But the two main things we ended up actioning was just being more explicit about how we should do stuff and what it was. What is the thing now? What is the model? Because you know, loads of organizations were reactive and hadn't come out with a line saying, this is now what we're doing, this is how we're going to set up, and here are the rules. So that's what we did, was just make it explicit. Here's the model. This is what we're going to do going forward. Give people as much commitment as you could in a situation that's in flux, but then set up the rules of engagement. So we worked with SoundCloud to develop a virtual working playbook, and that again, using the kind of best practice, the stuff that already existed pre-pandemic about how you should do this stuff. Loads of resources out there, put it all together in a tailored way. And maybe Ruth, you can talk about, like, has that worked? How has that been going down?
Yeah, that's what kind of jumped into my mind as well. That one of the biggest challenges was that everyone had kind of been forced into a new work situation, and we've not really spent that much time talking about standardizing that way of working. What are the protocols and the way you kind of naturally navigate when you come into an office and you see people doing things. That gets lost, obviously, the remote setup. So we built this playbook with Jess that touched on the tools that we use, how do we use them, what's our very, like, really basic stuff about how we have a meeting, you know, and how do we communicate and why do we communicate. And also we had a section that focused on well-being, of course, like as a manager, what can you be doing to ensure that your team, even though they're not in the same room as you, are not suffering.
Would you say, Ruth, that sorry for interrupting you. Would you say that, I mean, you know, well-being is a term, you know, I hear a lot recently, and we do a lot of well-being. You know, there's a lot of well-being aspects to a number of our programs in the academy, and it's something we really feel that has surfaced as an important element in work and education during lockdown and the pandemic. Maybe just talk to us a little bit more about that whole well-being, and maybe the structure of the new office, you know, and I don't mean physical, but that kind of cultural structure of the new office.
Yeah, I think during the pandemic, like in so many different worlds, work and personal, like, well-being became huge, like priority number one, like priority for certainly for SoundCloud, for employees. Again, I think the first thing you can do is being explicit and having conversations and empowering people managers to be able to have conversations with employees that are empathy driven also. And well, funny you mentioned our office design. We actually did a lot of work on our physical office design to facilitate more say well-being and opportunities for people to connect in person and to make sure their time in the office was very fruitful for, like, fulfilling that what they were lacking, like in terms of social connection. We also have a lot of kind of wellness spaces in the new office. And I think both in the way I'm thinking about it, also in a remote work.
And do you think, like, that whole new structural design, has that been part of the enabling or the new enabling cultural change, or was part of that there before, Ruth?
100%. Well, we've always, like, our offices were always really, like, important to us, and we do have a really strong and dynamic and fun office culture. But one of the huge outcomes from the work with Jess was rethinking the purpose of that office. And yeah, I think there was two big kind of actions that came from work. One was the playbook that we mentioned, but also the other was repositioning our offices as hubs. So now we think of our 4 offices as hubs of social connectivity, in-person collaboration, and connection to our industry as well. Being able to use them as a space that bring in the music industry into our offices and offer our employees an opportunity to connect to that too. And yeah, we've kind of brought in a whole new variety of how you can work in the office. Like we used to just, like any office, just have very standard individual desks. We've got some individual desks, it's all flex desking, hot desking now. We have a lot more project rooms, project desks that teams can book on the fly, more whiteboards, more individual meeting rooms. And this is all outcomes from the shift in the way we work and the work.
Okay, wow, sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I know there's a number of questions in the chat box, and I might just refer to Josephine to help me with those in a few minutes before we finish up. Great, thanks, Josephine. And then, we've about 10 minutes left, so I have a few more questions, and then we'll finish off with some Q&A, guys, if that's okay with you. I suppose one of the things that struck me in this whole, journey, let's call it, and is anxiety. And Kira mentioned it, and I think the guys from my team maybe have alluded to as well. So a lot of people have this kind of anxiety about going back to the office, this anxiety about going back, traveling to work, down the M50 or whatever your road is of travel. So how this is for either of you, how can an organization create that inclusive environment in the hybrid model where people are welcome? If they need to work from home, they work from home, and so on, or that hybrid model of working. I think the word working from home probably will change. So how can they create that environment that lessens anxiety?
I think it comes back to boundaries and having healthy boundaries. And like what we saw with the pandemic and the overnight shift to online was what you kind of mentioned at the beginning, was like that private boundary dissolved suddenly, and some people were okay with it, some people were really sensitive about it, and it was quite exposing for a lot of people. We're now in a different phase of this boundary recreation, right, where employers who have the power in the relationship are saying, come on back in, it's grand. But what people perceive to be safe and fine and okay for them is very, very different, and it totally depends on who's in your family network. If you've got somebody that's not able to be vaccinated and is particularly vulnerable to the virus, going into an office probably now seems like a really, really dangerous thing to do, probably for somebody that you might really love. So I think we really have to exercise autonomy here, give people autonomy, let them design what's safe for them, and work and listen, like just really listen to the needs. I think employers have to get used to adapting to the needs of their employees, and some are really good at this, some are not. But at the end of the day, right, you force somebody to come to an office who's highly anxious, you're not going to do good work. They're not going to do good work. So why would you want that? That's my 2 cents anyway.
Great, thanks, Jess. Ruth, did you want to add anything to that?
No, just echo it. I think the important thing is just recognizing the diversity of people that you have in your organization and designing for the diverse groups. And obviously there's no one size fits all for anything that's people related.
No.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of gives a nice segue into my kind of last couple of questions. I've always been impressed with, leadership in organizations like SoundCloud and maybe some of our, some of the other larger, tech companies around the world. And they always kind of promote themselves as having the really cool leaders. And I think, that's important, but sometimes it's lip service as well. This is maybe, a bit of a loaded question maybe for both of you, but what is the role, or what are the role of leaders in making this hybrid model a success? Because I think the whole concept of emotional leadership, emotional intelligence leadership, is becoming so much more important now as we come out of this pandemic, hopefully. So what is the role of leaders in your organization or other organizations to make this hybrid model a success? Jess?
The evidence on this one is really clear, right? And there's lots of stuff in psychology where the evidence doesn't help as much, but this one's really, really clear. Leaders need to set the tone. They need to set a cultural tone, and they need to follow with their actions. Actions have to follow words in this space. So I've seen examples in lots of organizations where, yes, okay, we will still support you to work from home, but the leadership team have decided to hire a hotel room and we're coming together every week and thrashing through stuff, and you're not there. That's not leadership, right? If you really want to be inclusive, you have to model it. I think that's the kind of the first thing. It's also, though, and I think this is kind of like the most key thing is like, it's adaptation, right? You've got to be okay with adapting. You've got to be okay as well with sometimes not getting it right and owning it and saying, didn't get that one right, we're going to change it. That's leadership.
Yeah.
Saying like, no, let's press on.
Maybe embracing failure to understand that we can learn from failure.
Exactly. But like, you know, it's pressing on with the status quo is just, your company won't survive, I think is the bottom line.
Thanks, Jess. And Ruth, you know, I mean, I know you want to keep the boss happy in SoundCloud, but maybe just give us a quick, you know, overview of the leadership in SoundCloud. Have they given an inclusive, I think what you told us already they have, but maybe just talk to us a little bit more about that concept of how they're making this hybrid model a success.
Yeah, I think as Jess described, they had to be role models from day one. And actually in the research that we did, I think one of the challenges we came up against, that there was a perception in our workplace that people could be drawn into the office, you know, without enough notice and not in the way that felt good for them. I don't think it was necessarily a founded perception, but it was one that existed because leaders hadn't, I suppose, explicitly spoken about their support of our design project and of Connection First, our working model. So we had buy-in from the first day and keeping them involved in the conversations all along, like every update they were involved in, and kind of giving green light at each stage, and making sure that they're the ambassadors for the in front of the whole company.
Yeah, I think that ambassadorial role is very important. And somebody in the chat box there, I think it was James, said about trust, that whole concept of trust, to understand that relationship between organizations and their employees. So good point, James, and thanks for that. Okay, I'm going to finish up. We're just hitting the time, and then I'll just pass over to Josephine to get some questions, because I haven't been looking at the chat box, I must admit. And I'm going to just going to maybe, you know, throw a hand grenade question at you to finish up. You know, Ruth, you work in a global organization that has multiple millions of customers, and Jess, you have great experience in this space of innovation, creativity, and enabling organizations, and you've worked with other global partners, I know, as well as SoundCloud. So I'll just head to maybe Ruth first, and then finish up with Jess. Ruth, what is next in the future of work? And you can answer that from a SoundCloud perspective if you want.
Okay. Yeah, I think hybrid is here, and I think it's here to stay. And I think flexibility is only going to become more important. And I think working models that are built on flexibility and trust, like leaders trusting employees, are the ones that will be most successful.
Thanks, Ruth. Jess, what is the future? What is next in the future of work?
I completely agree with Ruth, and actually, Luke, we have a pretty solid point of view on this at the Brave Lab. We think there's 3 core skills that organizations need to start embedding now. We think that this working model challenge is small business compared to what's coming down the line with regards to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and accessibility, and the climate crisis, right? So it's adapt to survive. So get adaptation skills embedded in your organization. As Ruth said, hybrid's not going nowhere. Invest in virtual technology and facilitation skills. Like it's a very different thing to help people reach consensus online than it is in a room and make decisions, do planning, all that kind of stuff. So we think investing in kind of those skills, investing in adaptation, and making sure that every role in your organization knows they have responsibility on these key changes that are going to affect every organization on the planet, which is climate and creating equity for all in our organizations. It is coming down the line, and you know, it's adapt to survive for organizations, and that's what I think the future work is.
Wow, thanks. Challenging times ahead then, Jess. So that's an interesting point to leave it on. So I just might go over to, sorry, Michael, do you want to jump in there? Yeah,
I'm going to come in on that point of time. We've hit our promised 12:30 boundary, and time etiquette is something that we've all learned in Zoom, is if you can do it, keep to it. So I'm sorry for cutting you off, like I cut Ciara off, and like our colleagues in IT got cut off. But what we hope for this morning, and what you've done between you, is provide multiple interesting perspectives. Ciara raised a whole bunch of questions at the start. You guys have looked at how people have addressed those questions in SoundCloud and the kind of support, the kind of thinking you used in doing it. And our colleagues in IT services anchored us in the practical reality of day-to-day doing. So our hope this morning was to provide a number of perspectives, and I think we did that. And just so, at final thank yous to Alan and to Jess and to Ruth for your section, and for Ciara for her contributions at the start, and for Aidan and for Peter. But probably the most important thank you I need to do is for Josephine and Agile, who was at the heart of organising all of this. So thank you to Josephine and my colleagues there, and to Mark Rogers for opening the session. So once again, folks, Work Smarter Together is about celebrating collaboration and creativity and being there for one another. And we'll see you again sometime soon. Take care and goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thank you now.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I haven't